future trends, deep insights, industry leaders. This is the iGaming Next podcast with your host, Pierre Lindh.
All right. Welcome to another episode of the iGaming Next podcast. Today with Dima Reiderman of BtoBet. How's it going, Dima?
Hi, Pierre. Thank you. Everything's great. I'm here in Malta. Countries opening up. We're starting to kind of forget that COVID was here. The first signs are there, so definitely looks good.
Yeah, absolutely. That's very much the feeling that I'm getting as well here now. I got my second injection of the vaccine yesterday. I still have two arms, not like a third arm growing out of me or anything like this. So, we're fortunate, I guess, Dima, that we're actually in the country that is world leading in this process. So hopefully that will mean that we'll reach some sort of normality soon, I hope. What do you think?
I really hope so. I'm keen to travel, looking forward to seeing my family, which I haven't seen for a while. And looking forward to having everything opening up, meeting some friends, meeting some business partners. It's been long due, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So Dima, you're the CEO of BtoBet, obviously, which was acquired by Aspire Global here just about half a year ago, a little bit more in November or so, I think, of 2020. And you jumped over then, obviously, to BtoBet to kind of lead the progress in that organization under Aspire Global. And I'd love for you to just kind of introduce partly yourself a little bit as well, your background, and also what the purpose of BtoBet is and so on and so forth. So feel free to take it away here.
Sure. So maybe I'll start with myself. Like you mentioned, before joining BtoBet, I was working with Aspire Global. That was 7 years. In the recent years, I was the chief operations officer as well, and then made the crossover. Before Aspire Global was not really in gaming. I was working in some e-commerce industries, some financial trading, and some sales background. Let's put it this way. Gaming is exciting, especially now the transition from Aspire Global to BtoBet and from what was traditionally casino-led business in Aspire Global into the spearhead, which is the sports. So that's quite interesting as well. If I want to talk a bit about BtoBet, then this is a company that was founded and still based out of North Macedonia, which is really a beautiful country. And out of that, we offer a really wide range of iGaming solutions. We have a PAM platform, a retail betting solution, and an online sportsbook. So really, really wide offering that helps us succeed in some of the emerging markets, right? I think that BtoBet as a company, but as a solution provider, was always known for its player-centric approach. I think that's the best way to put it. And the other aspect would probably be the highly flexible architecture and the whole solution through and through, from the core platform functions, through the front end, through and through. It's a highly flexible solution, and I think that's one of the key parameters that help BtoBet to grow and succeed in such interesting markets as Africa or Latin America, for example. If we're looking at the present, and maybe the near future of BtoBet, following Aspire Global's acquisition, as you mentioned, while we keep our strong position in the markets that were traditionally recognized as leaders, right? So, for example, we've recently launched in Colombia with both Betfair and right after that with William Hill. So while we keep our market position in there, we're definitely going to enter Europe in the imminent future, into more mature markets, into more developed markets. So to get that done, we had to really invest heavy in platform certification and in some product specifics to cater to the requirements and the player needs of Europe. These are obviously markets that are well developed, and some are competitive, some are even at the verge of being saturated, I would say. So we had to do some catch up in terms of the European facing offering. So that's how the near future looks like for BtoBet. If I'm going to touch just a bit on the longer term, then we're beginning to look into the North American market. Of course, there's still some way to go, and there's a lot of work to be done. But what we do believe that in the future, we will have to be present in those markets, and our aspirations are, just as any other market we enter, are to be a market-leading solution there as well. Of course, it's a complex market. It's highly fragmented. There's so many states, so many requirements, so many big players out there, and it's not an easy road. We know it, but I think that the sheer market potential makes our presence there just a must. That's how we see it in the long run. To get there, the company as a whole, we are now focusing more on the sportsbook part of the solution. I mean, I guess we have all the others that I mentioned in the beginning, but definitely sportsbook is our future. So we'll be heavily investing in developing that more and more going forward. And yeah, I think we're lucky because with the strength of the group, of the Aspire Global Group as a whole, I think we're very well positioned. We're being able to offer the full iGaming suite of solutions. So we have the platforms, we have the sports, and we have the games aggregation all in one. And I truly believe this will be, another factor that will help us as BtoBet win some key agreements and in that very interesting market.
Yeah, it's so interesting, and this is kind of why we landed on the topic of emerging markets today, because BtoBet is an interesting use case in this, because you guys obviously focus on emerging markets, and now you're attacking kind of the mainstream European market here. So it's kind of like the inverse strategy to many of the other established gaming companies who kind of was born out of Europe and is now kind of expanding globally. So I want to stay on this topic on emerging markets, and maybe let's dive into US, as you mentioned here, as a starting point. You mentioned kind of barriers to entry, massive in the US. It's not an easy market to navigate, and now we talk about US as one market, but in reality, it's 50 states. That is kind of, they all have their own nuances, cultures, different regulation, and so on and so forth. But it seems that there's the consensus now that the US market will become by far the biggest market in the world. So how can you not tackle that market? But can you give your analysis, like when you have been discussing, entering the US market internally, what are your considerations here? Have there been any discussions internally, like or like how are we gonna do this? What are the major obstacles, and what's your general thoughts on the market and its future?
Yes, well, I can share that we have quite a few discussions inside the company, but also on the group level. I wouldn't be able to share all the nitty-gritty stuff. I hope you can understand.
It was a good try, but yeah, okay.
Yes. What I can say is, I want to go back to my previous statement. It's just too big not to be there. I don't think any company can afford it going forward. And we see the trends, like you've said, with the established European operators. Now, I think that's one driver is the market potential. The other one is the, regulatory framework and the developments in the traditional markets for all those traditional operators. I mean, Europe, it gets crowded, and the taxation is on the rise, and the regulation is kind of making it more and more challenging to run a successful operation. So I think these two are probably the main drivers, and it's all connected, because as a result of the situation in Europe, operators are setting their eyes on the other markets, and the US is obviously the leading one. I think it's important to mention that the US and the mature European markets are at different stages in the life cycle, in the sense that restriction of gambling comes in waves, and at the moment we see in the US there's a curve towards greater liberalization. I mean, markets just opening up, and then more and more states open up. Where in the UK, along with some other European jurisdictions, there's a little bit of the opposite curve happening at the moment. And I think that's because there are different life stages in terms of the industry as a whole. So what might seem to be as imbalance is a result of the European jurisdictions of being more mature, moving towards the 10, 20 years after they started, but say 10 years before the US right? So they have a kind of a 10 years ahead of a jump. So in the long run, I'm sure that US will get there as well. I mean, it's probably that's how it looks. But for now, the market is booming, the market is opening up, and people are looking at market valuations ranging from 5 to 10 billion in the next 5 years, and I've even seen higher figures. And I guess people just look at themselves at the mirror and asking, how can I not be there? And it's on everyone's table. There is a catch, especially for the customer-facing B2C operations. Being first to the party or among the first, it has benefits, it has perks. There is a price to pay, and it's a steep price. It's the marketing price. There was someone who referred to the marketing in the US right now as a war, nothing short of it. And he also said there will be carcasses left. I couldn't agree more. I mean, you can see the big boys spending lots and lots, even on the account of profits, and they're being vocal about it. And it's a high barrier. I'm sure from all the ones that are currently trying, not everyone will succeed. For us as a B2B solution provider, I think the market is a bit different than the rest, where we see the market leaders, the market giants, they're very, very determined on owning every single part of the solution, every single component. They're literally buying platforms and sportsbook left, right, and center. And that's may seem intimidating at first, but if you look at what you would call the tier twos at the same US market, these are still quite big operations. I mean, there's still a lot of money in there, and US market being the size it is, those tier twos and tier threes, which I believe we can tackle very successfully, that's a very lucrative piece of the pie, so to speak. And with our complete offering, I really believe we're well positioned to take it on.
Yeah, it's interesting what you mentioned here, and obviously DraftKings and SBTech being the most prominent example here of DraftKings publicly going out to say that we want to own every part of the operation, proprietary solutions rather than taking in third parties like they used to contract Kambi, obviously, and at the same time, like you mentioned, it must be a much more difficult decision for the B2Cs to take right now to enter market, because in a sense you could say that, like, if you're a tier 2 operator, risking your cash flow, risking the EBITDA for the years to come is a risky move. And so you might want to say that, okay, let's wait a couple of years and take a decision. But at the same time, there are states where there's just a limited amount of licenses, right? And you kind of have to tackle the market right now, or you might be left out of the party, so to say. So at least as a supplier, it must be nice to not have this consideration of you have to basically invest yourself to enter the market in the first place. But I'm sure you have your own challenges, regulatory and so forth, to jump over to enter the US market.
Absolutely. I mean, there's platform certifications. There's a huge adaptation to the product that will have to be done. The market's presentation, the offering, the data streams. I mean, there's really a lot to do. But we feel confident in that sense. I mean, we've mapped out the milestones. We know what we need to do to cater to the taste of the North American players. We understand the differences between that tradition and the markets that we're currently at. We're somewhat lucky because with the existing operations, we already got a sense of it. I'll give you an example. We're running a few very successful partnerships in Mexico, and some of the flavors of sports betting in Mexico, they're much closer to the US than to Europe. There's some baseball in there. There's some American football, of course. So we have a good sense of direction. We've mapped out, like I said, the milestones we need to take, and when the time is right, we're ready to take on US as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. So final question on the US market. The expectation again is from all sides that the US market will be absolutely massive, of course. At the same time, forgive my ignorance here. I'm a little bit on the outside here, but take Florida as an example now, which is opening up, one of the big 4 states, which is now opening its doors to becoming regulated as well. Choosing a strategy that might be considered not so friendly for competition. Let's say with all licenses have to go through Hard Rock's platform, basically. Again, forgive my ignorance here for not if I'm butchering this, but in essence, the question is: do you think that there is a risk that this party can be a bit spoiled if they go down the wrong direction, the regulators, and choosing these type of monopoly-like solutions?
Yeah, listen, there's plenty of mistakes a regulator can make. What you've mentioned is possibly one of them. We've seen others. It's difficult to say how it would play out. I mean, personally, to me, Florida was a bit of a surprise. I didn't expect that outcome, but let's put it this way. I'm probably a bit not up to date, same as you are, but still being like you said, the big four states, one of the biggest states, one of the biggest markets. I always see the glass half full, and I think that there's still so much business that will be left, even without Florida. I hope that the other states will not follow. If I'm honest, I hope it will be a little bit more open to competition. I mean, at the end of the day, US is the birthplace of allowing competition and people to succeed, and
Exactly.
basically based on. So I really hope they will take the same route. And yeah, I personally don't worry about Florida too much. Like I said, there's still a lot of food on the table.
Absolutely, and it seems very much that it's not really a decision that is set in stone, so to say. And hopefully they would consider, and I would assume that there's a lot of forces that are obviously working towards opening up Florida to for more opportunities rather than just closing it to one monopoly-like solution. So much more information to follow there. I'm absolutely sure of that, and it'll be interesting, like you're saying, to see how the development is in the US. Now, jumping over, let's jump south of the border here to Latin America while we are on that side of the world. You talked about, Dima, that BtoBet traditionally have been interested in the major markets in the Latin American market. Can you talk a little bit here as well? Just again, your analysis of the Latin American market, its past, present, and future, and especially considering your perspective with BtoBet.
Yes, thank you. I think that Latin America has a very bright future, especially when taking into consideration that the largest market, Brazil, is, and I know we keep saying that in the industry, but it's upcoming a regulatory framework. Not the first time people hear and hope for it, but it really seems now more than ever that it's really around the corner. With our history over there in the continent, we can look at Colombia being the continent's kind of a mature market, sort of. I mean, I know it's difficult to say mature after only 4 or 5 years of having a framework in there, but still, it's one of the only ones, the only one there with a legislative framework that is on a national level. And we know that other markets are looking to follow their steps, right? You have Argentina, you have Peru, and these are currently at work at their own regulations, where some progress is being made. The recent pandemic has probably put some of the things on ice, but there's work in progress. But yeah, if we put it all in proportion, I think there's a widespread consensus that the number one market to look in Latin is Brazil. If we have any takeouts from some lessons learned from the Colombian market, is that we see that there's very significant growth we can expect following the introduction of the regulatory framework. I mean, we all seen the double-digit growth in the Colombian market over the first few years after the framework was introduced. And I think it's worth mentioning that in Colombia, they realized that the regulatory process is kind of useless unless the white market has the same content offering as the offshore black market. And I hope they will take the same direction in Brazil, because it's quite important. Otherwise, once regulation kicks in, you effectively see gray turning into black, if you know what I mean. So you really don't want to push players that way. And even happens in Europe today. So I'm sure it will happen in Latin America if they do it wrong. So the expected regulation on the market in Brazil, without regulation to all of its vertical, really might have the opposite effect of what was intended. This is something that the decision makers over there need to be minded of. Then look at the market itself. I mean, it depends which analysis you read, but even the pessimistic ones estimated in excess of 2 billion, and some are even tripling that. So we know it's big. Maybe it's huge. It's just let's see how big it is. It's a growing market. It has a long-standing tradition of passion for sports. You have the pride of the national football team. You have the local sports. You have beach volley, beach soccer, futsal. Really is passion for sports in the country. And if you take into account the assumption, which I really feel comfortable with looking at Colombia, that after regulation will be there, the market will actually grow. You add to that the expected economic growth of the region as a whole and as a country, and Brazil as a country, where you're very likely to see the individual spend of the consumers is likely to increase. And I believe that after it does, the first industries to benefit with that will be the entertainment industries. And we're lucky to work in one of those. And then you have the people overgoing, a digital transformation. They want to spend more. They want to spend more over new channels, smartphones and apps, and embracing more of a Western type of consumer behavior, with more and more being consumed online. And so that goes into entertainment as well, and then naturally transitions into iGaming. And I think we have really strong testimonial to that in Brazil. Let me give you an example. I mean, we in Malta here, we all like to use Revolut as they call them challenger banks. And you have N26 in Germany, and you have Monzo, and you have Monese. So there's really the rise of all these challengers banks. It's all digital age, right? And not many people know, but in Brazil, there is Nubank, which makes all these look like, kindergarten children, because, they recently surpassed 35 million users, and they're now worth over 25 billion. And they're now officially the fourth most valuable bank in all of Latin America. And that's within only a few years.
Wow. Amazing.
So if there's something for us to take from it, is that the country is de facto right now ongoing a digital transformation. It's embracing these new trends, and the way from that into gambling as soon as it's regulated, I think it's a very short path.
Yeah, exactly. Would there be like traditional any like major barriers to entry in if we take South America as a unique example? Is there any challenges like for you guys as BtoBet, or if you're an operator to enter that market that you need to consider?
I think that any market, definitely Brazil, would require a lot of local expertise and market know-how. And this is the approach we've had in the other Latin American markets, where we have a local partner for every operation over there. So Brazil will definitely be one of those. All the others, I mean, we'll still need to see what are the requirements they will come up with. I don't see it as a showstopper for us as BtoBet. We have a lot of experience in adapting into that, and let's be honest, Colombia is a very demanding regulatory framework, and we're successfully adapted to that. So I believe we'll be fast in being to market in Brazil. I believe we'll be able to be one of the first. Of course there will be challenges, but I think we're very, very well positioned, and I think we'll be able to introduce one of the best and fastest solutions to the market.
Brilliant. I'll tell you a funny story, Dima, on South America, Colombia specifically. I think it was about 10 years ago. So there was a friend of mine who was basically investigating the market, trying to understand its dynamics and so on and so forth to open their operation there. And so he traveled to Colombia to understand, to speak to the local betting shops and stuff like that. To first of all understand, like, how do you accept payments? First of all, like, what is the situation with payments here? And they told the story, like, the biggest lottery at the time was done such that, like, most, to reach the local villagers, there was basically individuals who had these tickets basically in a backpack, traveling in the canoe around the river to get to the local villages, hand out the ticket, collect the money, and then kind of canoe back to headquarters, so to say. And they made a point that like listen, this is not the Europe that we're dealing with here, with with Visa and so on and so forth. Like here it's very primitive. But I'm guessing that a lot has happened since then. Let's say.
No, I totally agree. And funny you mentioned it. Last time I was in Colombia was, I think, 15 years ago. So I didn't really follow what happened since. But listen, it's emerging markets, which means still traditionally a lot of retail-based betting, a lot of brick and mortar, a lot of cash being the predominant. But you've mentioned people taking money in betting shops and tickets. I'm happy to say that this is one of the reasons that I feel so confident. If you look at Colombia, we have BtoBet operating with a few of the brands and hundreds of retail shops offline. So when I say we have a strong footprint and I believe we can adapt to the Brazilian market, even if it requires some retail presence, I say it out of experience.
Absolutely. Yeah, exciting times. So I'm looking forward to see how that goes as well. And Dima, leaving the crocodile infested canoe rides aside here, something that I'm super curious about as well is it seems that also BtoBet have been specialized in the African continent longer than most, so to say. And you talked about that BtoBet has been involved or taking customers from a wide range of nations within Africa. And same thing goes here. I'd love to hear the dynamics at play here for the African continent, because you would imagine that both from payments perspective, but also from like internet connectivity perspectives and infrastructure, that this continent must be completely different to deal with than obviously Europe, but any other continent as well. So same thing here. I'd love to have your thoughts on that continent.
Yes. Listen, I think that the first challenge in addressing Africa, different from other continents, is looking at it as a whole. That's on the verge of being between difficult to wrong. I mean, it is so fragmented in every way. Let's look at the basics. We're talking about almost 1.5 billion people, and they're spread of around 50 countries, give or take. Then you have more than 20 official languages and probably a few hundreds, if not more, unofficial ones. So that by itself gives you a sense of complexity. Even if you compare it to other emerging markets in Latin America, it's a continent with 2 languages and less than half the amount of countries. So Africa by itself is a huge challenge from every perspective. And the same goes when we dive deeper into the regulatory framework, where you have some countries with an established framework in place, Tanzania, South Africa, Kenya. You have countries that are at the other edge of the rainbow, where it's completely illegal, like Mali, for example. And then there's a lot of countries that are kind of in between, sort of shades of gray, where it's either not allowed or limited licensing available, and taxation is an ongoing conversation. So really, it's very diverse. It's one of the things you've mentioned, that the key factors that drive the industry in Africa are, I would say, exogenic factors, coming from the outside. You have the telecommunication, which is probably one of the strongest drivers. You have banking and the transition to e-commerce and payments and technology as a whole, right? A traditional African market, and I think it's pretty much still the case, it's dominated by cash, right? So in most places, it's still a brick and mortar betting shop type of operation you need to succeed. And a betting shop, it's not only a betting shop, it fulfills social functions, right? This is where the people come in, sit down, have a tea, have a coffee, have a beer, maybe watch a game together, and then, or maybe place a bet or two. So there's also the social element in place. As Africa accelerates its digital transformation, and the telco companies, they're investing heavily in the region, rolling out 4G across some of the countries. You see the increase in smartphone and internet penetration. You see a very important trend of lowering the data costs. That's a significant factor when you go to Africa. I mean, you really need to be minded of, light browsers and different operating systems than you are in the European markets. We see new payment solutions coming into the continent, and it's very much different. I mean, you said it yourself before, using the Colombian example. Credit cards are not that popular, to say the least. So you have a lot of different types of payment methods, a lot, mobile carrier-based type of thing. So there's a lot of other differences, but as a whole, I think Africa presents a very interesting, but also very rewarding technological challenge. If we're trying to look into the markets and what's going to happen to the future, again, I think it's difficult to address the continent as a whole. There are still some potentially hidden gems, right? So look at the Look at Ethiopia, for example. There's no framework over that never happens, but then it's a country of 110, 120 million people in it, and sooner or later something's going to happen there, and you just cannot ignore a market of that size. And I know that some players are already looking into it, and that's just one example. There's many of those. Personally, if I would have to choose one country to follow, I would probably focus on Nigeria. We see some really interesting developments, some form of regulation starting to take place. And I believe it will continue to grow the market. I mean, it has a population of over 200 million, very similar to Brazil, which we mentioned a few minutes ago. It's already the second largest market on the continent, following only South Africa. It's only second to South Africa today. Now, you have surveys suggesting that about a third of the population is actively involved in sports betting, right? It's 60 million people.
Wow.
That's huge. It's a huge potential.
Massive.
60 million punters. And there's more testimonials to that. I mean, sports betting and football in particular, but sports betting as a whole is so popular that if you see, the country's most visited websites, you see that the top bookies in the countries compete with Facebook and Google on the same level.
Wow.
You constantly see them on the top 3, top 5 most visited website. And
that's incredible, actually.
You don't see that in many countries, right?
No.
So if you put together the really rapidly increasing smartphone penetration, the growth of the population, the drop, not even a reduction, but the drop of the mobile data prices, it's becoming cheaper and cheaper, and it's such a big country. I mean, over 200 million people. I think it's fair to say that it's definitely one market to keep an eye on.
Mm. I mean, do you see when you talk, Dima, in general on North America, LATAM, and Africa alone, it's becoming so clear that the industry is going through such a paradigm shift at the moment, where traditionally, on the operator side, you see some traditional operators, the Scandinavian focus one, pretty much only focusing on Europe and Northern Europe particularly. And now there is so many opportunities to diversify the organizations that you just can't afford not to do. Like you just mentioned on North America, LATAM, and Africa, and Asia, of course, is another massive emerging continent as well. And it's something that I've noticed as well in organizations. They talk a lot about the global diversification and how that has to become now a key central strategy to the future of the organizations. And I guess there's a twofold explanation to that. Partly the fact that taking Africa as an example, the connectivity is becoming better, society is moving forward, and we're bringing this market to be able to convert the population into customers. So that's one aspect that is at play. But then the second aspect as well is the fact that some European markets are becoming so strictly regulated that it's not feasible anymore for an operator or a supplier to stand and fall on, let's say, 2 or 3 key markets, because you might just get your leg chopped off from one day to the other, more or less. Is this a fair analysis, would you say?
Yeah, I'm an optimist by nature, so I think that as an industry we need to find a way to succeed in Europe. I mean, we must. But I am worried about watching the developments in Europe. I think many people are, and I think it's at this point, a lot of people say that it seems to be going one way, where you have the margins deteriorating, being lower and lower, and you have operations much more difficult to run today than a few years ago. There are some upsides to that, sure. I mean, responsible gambling is very important. Some level of advertising regulation should be in place, and operators are learning how to run a leaner and more efficient operation as a result of all these developments and the increased taxation, right? But I think that many people feel that in some of the markets it's been taken maybe a bit too far, and as a result, we have tangible indications of growing trends for the black operators, and those are the guys that don't play by the rules. On another positive note, new markets are opening up, right? You have Netherlands coming soon, so that's very nice new potential expected revenue stream. You have the highly anticipated review of the Gambling Act in the UK. So that gives us some room for optimism. And I think UK, not only being important as a market with its, with its revenue potential, it's also a kind of a regulatory beacon for the rest of the legislators in Europe. And I think that many of them already today and will keep looking at the UK as a role model in a sense. So I think that development is highly anticipated, and I think we all hope it goes the right way, so to speak. Taking that into account, there is that level of uncertainty, even with the anticipated revaluation, you're not sure how it's going to go. And many people feel that in some markets, it's been taking too far. We see the black market growing, and you're right. Maybe we should put our business elsewhere, or at least diversify. And I think that's what driving, as you've mentioned, people starting to look at the emerging markets, or the North American markets, and people don't want to keep all their eggs in one basket, which they don't feel it's safe. To sum it up, I believe that Europe is still a must-have lucrative market overall, and you must be present. And that's the reason we're entering there as well. And we have every intention to support it through the right partnerships with the experienced operators. And I'm sure that the experienced operators, at the end of the day, will find a way to succeed, perhaps with lower margins than what they were used to traditionally, which makes sense, but still in a profitable model.
Absolutely, and the consolidation is a driving force in Europe as well, where at least you would hope that this is the effect of the regulation, is that in a long-term scenario that we see only the serious players are being active in the locally regulated markets, like Germany, like Sweden, and so on and so forth, without these really low channelization rates and black market operators taking this big piece of the pie, which is expected now in Sweden, in Germany, and so forth. So you would hope that in a long-term perspective that it will turn out well for the serious operators. I want to move over now as well, just to hone in a little bit more on BtoBet product specifically.
Sure.
Here. You mentioned obviously that you're specializing on the sportsbook platform side of things, and I'd love to hear more, Dima, in general. Like when you look into the future, like how are you? What's your vision for this platform in general? How are you diversifying yourself from your competition, and what's your thoughts in general on this?
Yeah, I think that going forward, given the market that we intend to enter, we must, and we already started, really investing heavily in the product side. Not only adding the must-have. So, for example, if you go to US, you have to have all the American data and all the American races, etc., etc. But also on the core, I would say one other thing that we would really look to strengthen is the ability to scale, and I think this is where we really will excel. The way we believe the future will take us there is by investing in more machine learning technologies and perhaps introducing some AI elements in the future. And I think that the key to scale, and sports has so much data coming in, there's so much, all the sporting events, and at the same time you have all the players' actions and bets and cash outs and partial cash outs and cancellations and settlements, and there's so much data coming in. It comes in so fast. It all happens in real time. We're long past the point where humans can tackle it successfully. So you have to introduce, I think, as much of a machine element into it as you can, because you cannot keep recruiting those teams of hundreds of people just to cope with it. So for us, what we're going to really heavily invest on is algorithms, as machine learning, both from a product perspective in terms of crunching it and presenting it, but also in a perspective of providing analytic service and driving the sportsbook presentation, right? And if I'll give an example, then there's a big match tomorrow, and you can always put a banner with with the traditional three-way 1x2 markets on it, and hope that the player will place a bet. But then if you want to really engage with the player and make him place maybe another bet, maybe another two, and what happens when the game is over? How do you make him place the bet when there is no big game going on? So we're going to use machines to analyze all that happens in the sports world, to analyze all the player preference, and really provide, like I said at the beginning, a player-centric experience where you will be prompted to take the right bet at the right time with the right odds. And when I say right, that will be individual for you. So that's where we're heading. Same will go for the obviously fundamental part of risk analysis and trading settings. So there's a lot of strength in all that data that comes in. There's a lot of power if you know what to do with it and you know how to do it. So using those technologies, we intend to process all of the data in real time and have the conclusions drawn, implemented immediately into the risk management part of the business. So using really powerful cloud-based technologies, we think that we can achieve hopefully infinite scale and really rapid delivery.
Yeah, really interesting. You mentioned kind of the predictive models here that you guys are working on, and it's interesting because this is something that we live with on a day-to-day level that not many people maybe think about. But when you use Netflix or when you use Amazon or whichever site you can imagine, Facebook with its algorithms and so on and so forth, they really have perfected the predictive models to the point where Netflix knows exactly what to present to you as an individual to get you excited for whatever content they predict that you will enjoy. But it's something that, at least from my perspective, we haven't seen much of in the iGaming industry. There isn't really any strong predictive models to that extent that is being used in other sectors. And it seems a little bit like this is what you guys are tackling now, right? With these predictive models that can basically suggest to you what you want to bet at the right moment based on your history.
Yes, absolutely. And not only that, I'm personally a little bit biased because I come from the operation side of business with consumer facing, right? So you know, support centers, campaigns, stuff like that. So I may have a bit of a biased perspective on this, but I think we can all agree that in today's world, data is everything. Really, data is everything, and if you can measure it, then you can manage it. And now that you have the data, and we're all swamped in it, right? I mean, we all have so much data in front of us. Then you face the next questions: what do I do with it? How do I monetize it? And how do I do it? So if you're in marketing, then how do I optimize my marketing spend? And how do I do it fast? How do I spend my money wiser? And how do I get more bang for my buck? And how do I do it faster than my competitors? And like you mentioned, you need those predictive models to come in handy over there and help you with that, to predict the right ROI so you can adjust. Then, as I've mentioned, marketing towards the player, the best way to do it, and you've mentioned Netflix. So the same person that will place a bet, he's just finished watching Netflix a few hours ago, so he will be used to this recommendation proposition type of marketing, and it's natural for us to
expected
adapt.
Almost. And this you almost expect to be presented with the correct information, as also whatever platform industry you're using these days.
Absolutely. I personally find myself more and more browsing to the recommended Netflix. Now, I can't say it's a perfect match every time, don't get me wrong. But you're right, just the sheer idea of me expecting it when I'm there, I think we can take it, and we in BtoBet, we have every intention to. I think we can take it into our world, into sports betting. I mean, if you expect a series to be, why wouldn't I get a recommendation of a match that I'm highly likely to win my bet on? Or why wouldn't I don't get prompted with the specific type of market that I like to bet on? I mean, I'm a corners guy. I don't like to bet on horse racing. I don't like to bet on baseball. I like to bet on corners, or I like to bet on both teams to score or whatever. So I think that customers are kind of ready to get that proposition in front of them, so they won't feel intimidated. They'll know where we're coming from, and that's on the presentation side of things. And again, you need to have the technology that the big guys are using in Netflix and Amazon, but you need to have the technology to do that, right? Maybe another relevant example from the previous topic is responsible gambling. I mean, with what the regulator is expecting, the regulatory bodies are expecting of the operators, you need to monitor in real time all your player activities, with thousands or tens of thousands of players playing simultaneously, and you need to monitor that constantly around the clock. So one way to do it, you can recruit 200-300 people and start looking at bet sizes and stakes and withdrawal patterns and deposit patterns and etc. etc. That's not that easy, and it's not very cheap as well. On the other end, if you take the algorithms, which we already did, but if you take those and you harness the power of those and you just program them to recognize patterns that may be harmful, those are kind of the red flags going that this player is on the route of playing more than he should. And it's all scenario based, right? And you can then plug that into your CRM system to execute specific operational flows to ensure a sustainable operation. So again, you can hire 200-300 people to do that, or you can harness a machine to it, and it will do it better with zero error, and it will do it preemptively. So it will rather than responding to the player's behavior, it will recognize it, and then using the predictive models, it will be able to engage preemptively with infinite scale to all your database. So from every way you look at it, whether it's marketing optimization or proposition of the product, or just being compliant and playing the responsible gambling rules, I think you have to go with technology.
Absolutely, and Dima, I had Pini Yakal, of the CEO of Optimove, here on the podcast a while ago, and he talks a lot about obviously machine learning and predictive models using AI to basically take all the massive amount of data that is being collected. And the iGaming industry is quite a unique example in the sense that there is so much data available to be interpreted and used, which is something that is unique for the iGaming industry. And so the consensus is that the machine learning and its algorithm to interpret data is the future, to personalize the experience for the user, and also what you mentioned on RG, responsible gaming, to the fact to predict potential harmful gambling and so on and so forth, rather than having a team of 300 people that is not able to even do nearly the same job as a computer could eventually be able to do it. Interesting to hear, you guys are adopting this as well, and to start rounding things off today a bit, I have a last question for you here as well. On the topic of the future, and we talked machine learning and so on and so forth, and also we talked about the emerging markets here, and it just begs the question, like, how do you see the future of the gaming industry? What is your outlook? What are the opportunities here, if we want to summarize the discussion a bit, and also perhaps what are some of the threats in the next couple of years?
Yes, thank you for that. Interesting question. Yeah, these are heavy questions, but I'm happy to have them. I'll try to summarize in a few key points that I think we'll see. So I do believe that the social elements will come more and more in play in our industry as a whole. If we look backwards, 5-10 years back, every player, every punter, everybody wants to be anonymous. It's not something you boast about to your friends that you gamble, right? Maybe sports, poker was always different. Sports betting is a little bit different, being perceived as more of a skill-based rather than luck-based type of activity. But still, most people, they tend to keep it to themselves. And I think that's changing. And I think that's changing not only due to the actual people behavior change, but also the actual people that place those bets are completely new generations, right? And these are people that are grown into, social networks. They're all active on 3, 4, 5 social networks simultaneously. I mean, the people will tweet and post a post on Facebook and maybe some Snapchat or whatever, and all of that in the course of 1-2 hours. So I think that the social element, less anonymity, all that will slowly, maybe even faster than that, go into iGaming. And we see that starting with leaderboards and competitions, and some in casinos, some providers are now introducing share my win features, and you've already seen that in poker. So it's already, we can already see it emerging, I would say. It's not on that level, but it's there. So I think it's one trend that will definitely continue. As an industry as a whole, we have a big challenge ahead of us. We have our reputation. I mean, we're still, in many places, we're still perceived as this lean, mean, money-generating machine, rather than a form of entertainment, which I believe we truly are. So the industry as a whole, we still have a lot of work to do to work on that reputation, to try to kind of cross the line from this lean, mean, money-generating business to a form of entertainment, and now we need to win the audience, I would say, to have that perspective. So this is definitely something we all have to work on. Bouncing off the previous topics, I think that the traditional markets in the near future will continue to become more challenging to operate, and that will push the emerging markets even more forward. So there's a lot of optimism there, because I think there's a lot of expansion opportunities, and the legalization processes that we're seeing, we're seeing those in Africa, we're seeing those in Asia, we're seeing those in Latin America. Everywhere we look, we start to see the legalization, beginning to evolve faster and faster. I think that's a lot of opportunities, a lot of optimism there. From a technology perspective, if I would sum it up, I think that personalization of offering, and of course using technology to drive it, but personalization of offering is the way to go, and we'll see that more and more in every aspect of our gaming. So that's how I see it. Overall, I'm happy to be part of this industry, and I think we have a great and bright future ahead of us.
Absolutely, Dima. I'm happy to be a part of it with you as well. Dima, it's been an absolute pleasure today. It's super interesting to hear your insight here on the emerging markets, and also future of BtoBet and its place in the industry, and congratulations as well to Aspire, for a great acquisition. It's Alexander Fried is a great friend of mine as well. So happy to hear that you guys are collaborating. And thank you so much, Dima, for today. Any final words?
No, thank you very much, Pierre, for having me. It's been a very interesting conversation. And again, thank you for inviting me here.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thanks.